Once the purchase order is issued and accepted, the equipment provider's proposal becomes a project and moves to the responsibility of project management. The project manager should be in routine contact with the proposals manager, estimators, and sales representatives throughout the bidding phase and immediately prior to the receipt of the equipment order. This will ensure a proper transition from proposal to project through the joint review of bid documents and ensure full alignment of the project scope and requirements by the supplier's execution team.
For the client team, personnel will likely be unchanged when an equipment order moves from the bid to execution phases. Although the title of client personnel can change from company to company, the lead equipment order manager and primary point of contact representing the client will often carry one of the following synonymous titles of either project manager, project engineer, package engineer, or requisition engineer. Regardless of the title, the ideal candidate for this role within the client organization would be the primary individual whom led the bidding efforts, has an engineering background, brings a strategic and execution-oriented mindset, and where possible, is a person whom will continue to follow the equipment order past the delivery from the equipment supplier and into the field or final site location.
Now that we've identified whom will be leading the efforts in executing the equipment order, we will focus on the project management practices and priorities that are specifically related to engineered equipment order management. This includes routine meetings and communications with a focus on the kickoff meeting setup to start the order off correctly. We will also review financial controls, schedule stewardship, change order management, and document control practices.
Good coordination between the client and equipment supplier will undoubtedly require constant communication via emails, teleconferences, and routine status meetings. The initial kickoff meeting will set the framework for these communication habits by establishing alignment on all aspects of the order's future execution, while also setting the tone for the client and equipment provider's relationship. The kickoff meeting should occur as soon as practical upon receipt and acknowledgement of the purchase order by the supplier. The success of many equipment orders is often lost at the onset by either delaying this initial engagement weeks or more after the purchase order award, or not conducting the event altogether. Therefore, schedule this activity within the first 1 to 2 weeks after the purchase order award.
Both teams should prepare for the meeting by informing each other of their needs and expectations. To define those expectations, it is recommended that both the client and supplier perform short internal meetings prior to holding the joint kickoff meeting. In preparing for the meeting, the lead project or order managers from both the client and equipment providers team should agree on the location, duration, list of participants, and agenda in advance. To keep the meeting effective, it is important to right-size the invitee list. It is not necessary to include every person in the organization in the kickoff meeting or subsequently in every routine status meeting. It is important, however, for each discipline lead or functional lead to participate in the kickoff meetings. Another factor affecting participation and duration of the meeting is the location. It is highly recommended that the leads and PMs assigned to the order should meet in person and at the equipment supplier's facility. If the equipment supplier is remote from the client's home base and it becomes too costly for many to travel to a location, it is still recommended that the core team meet face-to-face. Developing a good working relationship, mutual understanding, and a professional respect between both the client and equipment provider leadership teams will always prove to be beneficial throughout the execution of the equipment order. This feat is much more difficult to establish if attempted remotely via video or teleconference.
The jointly agreed kickoff meeting agenda will likely cover the following essential topics: a scope overview of the engineering equipment, including key technical performance attributes, a schedule overview including intermediate expectations and milestones, a review of critical deliverables, the expected frequency of status meetings and their schedule, QA/QC procedural and inspection plan requirements, factory acceptance test requirements, and a review of the document control processes and drawing review time cycles. The meeting should define expectations for joint design reviews, cover key procurement needs such as the long lead items relative to the equipment order, fabrication procedures and other critical documents that require client review, and approvals such as welding, painting, and coating procedures. A particular emphasis should be placed on the near-term look ahead for the upcoming 2 to 3 weeks, covering critical documentation needs that needs to be either created or approved. Common examples of these early deliverables are preliminary P&IDs, one-lines, preliminary general arrangement drawings. Many fundamental decisions and agreements are normally required in this immediate period after the purchase order award, and quick action up front not only preserves time for addressing any future procurement or fabrication challenges, but also cultivates a sense of urgency for both organizations. And lastly, define expectations for routine follow-up meetings, whether they be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Typically, it is common to conduct these weekly status meetings in the beginning throughout completion of engineering reviews, switching to potentially shorter bi-weekly meetings in the middle of execution while fabrication is ongoing, and then again weekly near the order completion during the final testing and client approvals.
The goal of a project for a supplier's project management team is to safely deliver a project that meets customer expectations and is on budget, on time, and to quality standards. Let's talk further about the practical implication of these goals, starting first with financial responsibilities. Just as businesses are run by a profit and loss statement, projects are run by margin. This is a measurement you will hear time and again regarding an equipment supplier's project. Margin is the expected revenue less costs divided by revenue. A project sold for $88 million with a cost of $70 million would have a margin of 20.5. A common mistake is confusing markup with margin. Markup is the expected revenue less the costs divided by the costs. The same $88 million of revenue with a cost basis of $70 million would yield a markup of 25.7%. Budget management is crucial for the success of the project. With project being large endeavors that take place over many months and even years, a budget broken down by task is key. A project is usually organized by work breakdown structure, which is often shortened to WBS. Each WBS element will have an anticipated spend number established during the bidding phase. As a project is executed, spend is tracked to this number. So what does this look like in practice? In this example, for this project, you will see there are 4 columns: budget, actual, commitment, and available. The budget column represents the anticipated cost for that particular WBS structure. The actual means a PO has been issued against that number, while commitment notes the amount of allocated number to that WBS, and the available column shows available funds that can be used if required. The specifics of budget management tactics will vary by organization, but all organizations should be tracking expenditures in a similar manner. As organizations account for costs placed on a project, they must also keep tracking of revenue associated with this cost output. For small packages under a certain revenue threshold, equipment suppliers will recognize cost and revenue upon completion of the project. However, once that revenue number exceeds a certain amount, it becomes more accurate to recognize revenue gains incrementally. As such, projects that meet a company-declared threshold, usually overall revenue, will be designated to allow for incremental recognition of revenue. There are 2 major models to recognize revenue incrementally. We will refer to these models as percentage of completion and unit of completion models. A percentage of completion model is the simplest model, as the amount of revenue recognized on the project is strictly a function of consumed hours over projected hours and actual material costs over anticipated material costs. There are typically several buckets of labor, such as engineering, design, and fabrication, with projected hours being updated throughout the project. The main drawback of the POC model is estimated hours at the beginning of the project are not typically accurate and not always updated in a timely manner. Therefore, revenue is prone to overestimation using this model. A unit of completion project breaks up revenue into distinct project milestones. When a major project milestone is completed, such as the completion of all heat exchangers, then revenue associated with that milestone may be taken to that project. Forecasting revenue accurately is crucial to business management.
Financial controls for a client team for an equipment order are often a simple matter to track and monitor if set up properly in the initial stages. A purchase order value is often broken up into a series of milestone payments at the time of purchase order award. Typical milestone breakdowns are those such as project award, engineering completion, ordering of long lead components, completion of the order, and the receipt of final documentation. Both teams should remain diligent to log and sign change orders and to follow up on those change orders with formal purchase order amendments along the way to enable invoicing and payments to process smoothly. Thus, with simple project control routines put into place, both client and supplier should be able to monitor cost, upcoming milestone payments, change order status, and enable accurate forecasting of cash flow requirements throughout the duration of the equipment order's execution.
Schedule management is another fundamental aspect of stewarding engineered equipment orders and is often the central focus of many discussions between the client and supplier. One of the primary roles of the supplier and client project manager's leadership team is the proactive monitoring, managing, and mitigating potential risks to the project.
To aid in performing real-time schedule assessments, it is important that the client and supplier agree on which software platform and which versions will be used, and agree upon the frequency and level of detail to be shared and updated. There are numerous activities that a supplier must coordinate to successfully deliver a project. However, it is often common for the client and supplier to discuss activities as what is commonly referred to as a Level 2 schedule, or possibly a Level 3 schedule if even more detail for a particular order seems more appropriate. For effective client-supplier cooperation, the schedule should be developed immediately after purchase order award by translating the key activities, many of which are likely defined in the contract or purchase order documentation, into hard calendar dates. Specifically, this means taking dates that are commonly quoted in a PO as a PO award date plus X number of weeks for a given activity and turning those into real target calendar dates based on the date of the actual signed and acknowledged purchase order award.
For a supplier, internal activities will likely need to be tracked and monitored in much more detail, such as a Level 4 schedule that includes all activities associated with the work. This increased level of detail will assist in early identification of any potential tasks slipping and potentially impacting the supplier's ability to deliver the order on time. The more detailed schedule is also beneficial in monitoring and calculating earned progress against milestones and completed activities relative to hours or expenditures. This enables the supplier to gauge productivity of the organization and validate the accuracy of the bid assumptions and proposal. This method of earned progress is highly encouraged over a common but flawed alternative practice of simply equating expenditures and man hours spent versus a baseline estimate. Here's an example why this doesn't work well. For a project where 110 hours have been spent for a 100-hour activity, this shows is 110% complete. In reality, the hours should be updated to 130 and the project should be 85% complete.
Section 3, Part 3B, Scott Section's second section, Take 2. For the client, in addition to monitoring the supplier's progress in schedule developments, a higher level scheduling tool is recommended that tracks the progression of the engineering equipment order relative to the larger capital project's needs. A simple example would include tracking the following activities and milestone dates: baseline versus forecast versus actual. For the PO award date, as recognized by both the supplier and the client, engineering data received and approved, FATs and other key inspections, PO or contractual ready for shipment dates versus their forecast and actuals, estimated transport and shipping durations, and anticipated date on site versus the capital project's required on-site dates and installation drop-dead dates. The true required on-site need dates in support of the optimal site installation plan and the absolute drop-dead need dates are not always the immediate... Let's back that up one time. Let's start this little piece over. The true required on-site need dates in support of the optimal site installation plan and its absolute drop-dead need dates are not always immediately shared with the suppliers. In rare cases, the delivery date on the purchase order is the same as the required on-site date, often referred to as the ROS date, if the equipment happens to be on the capital project's critical path. More often though, the need for engineering data may actually be on the capital project's critical path, but there is some leeway, known as float, in the schedule between the contractual equipment delivery date and the required on-site needs. This float should be guarded carefully and not relinquished by the client without good reason. Having a firm grasp, though, on the impacts to the field installation program if an order is delivered late will greatly assist in understanding what options, flexibility, or workarounds could be discussed with the supplier if the supplier were to perceive a potential risk to meeting their contractual delivery dates.
As a supplier, it is not acceptable or looked highly upon by the client if contractual delivery dates and commitments made in order to win the purchase award are later not met. That said, the intent of good schedule management is to allow for joint discussions to be held and the best solution agreed upon as early as possible. Together, no matter the situation, both client and supplier, when working together early, can usually find a solution to the challenge. All right. I think I'm done, man.
Change order management is an important, yet often misunderstood aspect of engineered equipment orders. Change orders are an essential tool for controlling the project and ensuring a transparent, fairly priced, and fair schedule arrangement is maintained throughout the lifespan of the order. To achieve this and have change order management become a positive, useful, and highly beneficial topic for both the client and the supplier, we will cover some of the best practices and cultural traits that effective project teams demonstrate when it comes to addressing and handling change orders.
Suppliers should seek to quantify change orders in one of three ways: missed in bid, execution variance, or change order request. Missed in bid and execution variance are for internal purposes only and allow the supplier to quantify where an overrun of hours occurred. This overrun can be traceable to either an oversight by the bid team or an execution issue. Change order requests are external requests to the client and should only be issued if there truly is a change in scope generated by the client. Early identification and notification of change orders is critical. Change orders can be perceived as poor bargaining practice when requested at the end of the order. A change order register should be discussed as part of a standing agenda at each routine equipment order update. Each individual change order status should be shown as potential, pending, or approved. Both the client and supplier should raise change order requests for the register and for discussion the moment one is felt to have the potential to materialize into a change order at some point.
By raising potential change orders early, the combined project team can either mitigate the situation and the need for the formal change order request, minimize the likely impact of the change order content, or at the very least, anticipate the likely ramifications both schedule and cost-wise if the content of the change order is pursued. Change order status would change from potential to pending once a formal change order request addressing the cost and schedule impacts is being compiled for submittal, and to approved or denied status when it would occur in real time as the change orders are proactively managed throughout the order's execution. A key point to remember is that change order requests can be both positive and negative in terms of cost and schedule, as well as be raised by the client or the supplier. Common examples of these include client-driven scope growth or additions to the equipment order, scope reductions or the eliminations of portions of the scope by the client, or the rare but highly sought after negative change order, whereby the client and supplier are jointly able to optimize the engineering, fabrication, or delivery of the equipment, and thereby some of the cost or schedule savings realized by the equipment supplier are shared with the client.
Lastly, to assist in open and transparent schedule management, as change order requests are being raised, assessed, mitigated, eliminated, or approved in real time, any ramifications of the change order scopes to the engineered equipment's critical path and thus overall contractual delivery date should not only be captured in the routine schedule updates, but also captured formally via change order as a legal amendment to the contractual delivery date requirements. The best performing and most integrated teams of client and equipment supplier use change orders as another method to facilitate open, transparent discussions and to maintain common views and expectations throughout the order's execution.
Document control is probably one of the most underappreciated and least understood support disciplines. The document control function not only facilitates official technical communications, but also provides official records and timelines as to when various activities occurred, such as drawing submittals, formal reviews, document status changes, and greatly assisting in the compiling of final documentation. To ensure the project gets off to a smooth start, test the mechanics of the document control interface between the supplier and client's document control teams prior to the need to transmit the first deliverable to the client. Differences between companies' manual and electronic interface systems, their online portals, logins, access rights, access lists, transmittal contents, drawing formats, and numbering and nomenclature requirements are almost inevitable. Therefore, it is recommended to get these topics agreed upon and tested within the first days after a purchase order is awarded to avoid any unnecessary delays to the reviews and the turnarounds for some of the critical early deliverables.
Once the system, means, and methods of communication are confirmed, the primary role of document control teams are to assist the project managers in facilitating the timely review and return of commentary between the client and supplier. In order to do this, document control groups must maintain transmittal logs of all official correspondence and submittals, and to build and maintain a document registry known as MDRL that tracks the status of all deliverables. Although the responsibility to properly create deliverables lies with the originator, document controllers provide a valuable additional QA/QC service to the process by ensuring drawing formats, title blocks, naming, drawing, revision control, and conventions are consistently applied to all deliverables. Additionally, document control teams can assist the project managers by following up and expediting the review and return of comments upon submittal and receipt of a deliverable. It is essential for both the client and supplier teams to abide by agreements laid out in the purchase order and the kickoff meetings regarding drawing review cycles. Turnaround time starts the moment the transmittal is received, not when it's processed and distributed. Therefore, the time for document control teams to receive, process, and return comments should be accounted for within the agreed upon review cycle, which is usually 10 working days.
To facilitate the document control team's role, the project manager or lead engineer heading up the deliverable review should ensure there's a single point of contact within the team to vet and consolidate any commentary received from the greater project team. This ensures that a single set of commentary is provided to the document control team to process and to ensure deliverables are not being returned in a piecemeal fashion between parties. There are many facets to a properly functioning and efficient document control interface. However, the importance of proper documentation should be re-emphasized and not overlooked by any on the execution team of either supplier or client.
In efforts to save time, there is often a temptation to bypass document control procedures by sending partial and incomplete documents, providing informal or incomplete commentary verbally via emails or other methods. This can be well-intentioned and even advisable in certain situations. However, even if advanced copies of deliverables are sent between parties, a formal transmittal with all attachments should always follow shortly thereafter. Proper record keeping is essential to maintaining coordination between departments within the supplier, between the supplier and client, and providing backup to facilitate real-time cost, schedule, and change order reviews.